Welcome everyone to Introduction to Capture the Flag. I'm Fabian. I work for Control Plane, and we're running these Capture the Flag events at KubeCon, I don't know, for several years, basically forever, I think. We're a security consultancy, so in my day job, I help customers like governments, financial institutions, and so on to basically secure their cloud estate, everything from containers to Kubernetes, CI/CD, and so on. We're about 50 people across UK, Europe, North America, and APAC. And we basically run these CTFs to basically teach you about common security pitfalls we see out there in the wild, right? We design these vulnerable Kubernetes clusters, vulnerable on purpose, so that you can basically break into them and see how an attacker would approach this scenario. So we had one introduction session in the morning. This one is the second one for today. And then tomorrow we have the main event, right? We run the actual Capture the Flag event from tomorrow, 11 a.m., basically throughout the whole day. And you can come here, you get credentials from us to connect to this Kubernetes cluster and then solve different challenges, right? You don't need anything on your machine except SSH and a web browser. Everything else we will provide for you. All right. As I said, there are 3 different scenarios for you to solve tomorrow, and these are brought to you by Andrea and Gabriela. They're the security engineers at Control Plane who came up with these interesting scenarios and put together the vulnerable Kubernetes cluster. So if you want to give them a shout out after playing, they would appreciate it. What to expect? So in terms of organization, you have to connect to the CNCF Slack. So if you haven't done that, do that by tomorrow. And there's a KubeCon NA CTF channel where you find the Control Plane Taskmaster. And you can basically ask them, that will be me, to provide you credentials. And then you get access. You get an SSH key, you get an SSH config, and then you can connect to the cluster and start breaking it. There will be 3 different sets of credentials for 3 different scenarios, and each scenario also has 3 flags, right? So for a total of 9 to find. These flags always have the following pattern, so flag underscore CTF and then some long string. When you find something that resembles this flag, this is your solution, right? This is what you're looking for in this Kubernetes cluster. It might be the pod name, it might be in a log file, it might be in a Kubernetes annotation. Could be anywhere. All right. That's how these events are usually played. All of this information we have also written down on like a web page, so you can either scan the QR code now, or I will also put it up at the end of the session. This is basically where you find this web page, right? It explains everything. It links you out to the Slack channel I just mentioned earlier. It also has the channel, the schedule, and like further links, and in the setup section, it will tell you how to use these SSH config files we will provide you tomorrow. All right, the rest of the session, I will basically run you through a scenario we run at KubeCon India earlier this year, where you basically break into a Kubernetes cluster that is running Grafana and Victoria metrics, so you get a feeling on how these things usually play out. But before we start, do you have any questions? There are microphones on the table, or just shout at me. It's also fine. Good stuff. Yeah.
I know you were saying that everything is going to be provided to you, but is there any scenario where you would want to have our own tools or anything to interact with those customers for working through the challenges?
Not really. I mean, folks that play CTFs regularly, they have like a library of snippets and scripts. Yeah. But this is just something you will develop over time the more you play in these sort of events. But you don't need anything else. Once you connect via SSH, you will land inside a pod, inside this vulnerable Kubernetes cluster. It's a Debian-based image. You have kubectl access. You can install more stuff if you need to, and then just, I don't know, discover and be creative. Right?
Sorry if I missed it, but for the event tomorrow, I saw it was like a long time window.
Yes.
Is it something that like people are dropping in independently and you can do it on, like, whenever? Or is
Yes.
it like a time-based, so it's not like a time-based competition?
Both. I mean, we have a scoreboard, and if you want to compete for the first place, it makes sense if you show up at 11.
You can start whenever and still get
Yes,
rank.
yes.
Okay.
You can show up at, I don't know, 3 p.m. and request access and then try to still take the first place, but it'll be a bit harder. Right. Any other questions?
Are my classes really that bad, or is it blurry? Bad, it is blurry.
Oh,
That's just the projector.
The other one's clear.
this one is good. Maybe just
Classes are good.
move on. Can you fix the focus on the projector? Seems a bit blurry. All right. Thanks for the shout. All right. How does it work? So tomorrow, you, as I said, reach out on Slack, tell the taskmaster I would like to play, and ask for credentials, and you get one of these tar GZ archives. So when you unpack it, promise I know how to do that, then you find 3 different files in there. They are SSH private key, a config, and a known host file. So if you go in there, then you can use this SSH command and basically tell it, please use this local configuration instead of the SSH config you have on your system. This is also explained, as I said here, on the web page, or you can just ask us tomorrow if it's unclear how to proceed. Is it good? All right, nice. And once you get in there, as I said, you will land in a pod inside this vulnerable Kubernetes cluster, and it will also give you a bit of flavor text. It's highly recommended that you read this. This will usually give you some hints about what you're trying to achieve. Okay, in this scenario, it is all about observability and metrics and everything that can go wrong when you integrate tools like Grafana and Victoria metrics. So in this cluster, we have a Grafana configured, and the web UI is forwarded to you via SSH. So you can see we can access this Grafana dashboard. And the first thing my fingers do when I see a login, I just do admin, right? This is kind of like they do it themselves. But this doesn't work this time. So let's look a bit further. We also have a Victoria metrics endpoint. And here we can see like Victoria metrics is running. We have some targets, some is broken. And this is basically the starting point, right? You get dropped into a cluster and you kind of need to look a bit around and see what is to do, what there is to do. So let's do that. So first stuff, we can list the pods in all the namespaces to see what's running there. We can see there's a backend service running. The jump host is the one where we landed in. Then we have Grafana and Cert Manager, kubesystem, a bit of Ingress, and then we have Victoria logs and Victoria metrics. All right, because the Grafana dashboard was not available to us, let's dig a bit deeper. And there's a very cool command. You asked about like, are there like helpful tools you want to bring in? Actually, kubectl is very helpful in that regard. You can ask kubectl via auth can I, basically about the power you have as the user you're logged in as. So you can say list all the permissions I have in the Grafana namespace. And here we can see, okay, I have get, watch, and list permissions on namespaces, pods, secrets, and services. So let's take a look at those secrets. Get secrets. All right, there are 2. Very nice. So there's a Grafana secret and a Promptail secret, and I just ignore the 2 Helm release secrets. They're just for Helm to keep track of what it's doing. So let's take a look at the Grafana secret. And in there we can see we have the admin user and the admin password. They look a bit gibberish, but if you have played around with Kubernetes secrets, you might recognize that they are probably base64 decoded. So if we use a base64 decoder, we will find the first flag in here. Nice. And this would be basically the first part of this challenge solved. So what are you doing with the flag? You will go to CTFD. So this is linked out also from our starter website. You can create an account on CTFD. That's basically what we use as the scoreboard. And then you go to the corresponding challenge, put in your flag, and you will be rewarded the points. We will put the live scoreboard up tomorrow so you can compete for the first place. All right, any questions before we move on? That's like the general structure. You look around, and then you find the flag if you're lucky. Cool. So we can, the flag is also, as we can see, the admin password for Grafana. So let's go back to Grafana, and instead of admin, we put the flag in, and welcome. All right. Let's take a look also at Victoria Metrics, right? So we saw Victoria Metrics, the web UI itself is not protected, so we can just go to Victoria Metrics, put in a query, and then get some metrics. Come on. But Victoria Metrics needs to put in metrics from somewhere, right? And these are the targets. And we can see the only target that is configured is currently reported as down. Is there anything you recognize that could explain why it's down? Feel free to shout. Typo. Okay. So we can see there's backend, and then there's backend with an E. So someone obviously messed up the configuration there. So let's do the same stuff we did earlier with the auth can command, but instead of looking at the Grafana namespace, we go to Victoria Metrics namespace. And here we can see we also have get, list, watch, and also a few more. Create, update, patch, and delete permissions on the config map resources. So let's take a look at that. So we can see there are two config maps, and the second one is called scrape config. So if we dump that out, what do we see here? So we have the config for Victoria Metrics. It's like a global scrape interval. There's a basic auth credential, so this is interesting. Maybe remember that for later. And then we have targets. So there's backend with the typo. Let's try to rectify this. Okay, unable to launch the editor why? As I said, there are some things provided for you in this jump host, for example, kubectl, but not everything. But as I said, it's like a Debian-based image. So with apt update and install, you can install more packages. You have about a gig of RAM in this, so don't just install the whole internet. You can use whatever tools you need, like curl or vim or I don't know.
So
That's
does
that.
every user get their own jump host?
Yes, you all get your own Kubernetes cluster. Please ignore this error. It's an outdated scenario. I didn't have enough time to update it. You should not be seeing these errors in the scenario tomorrow. But yeah, from that point, you can install whatever. And then we should be able to edit the config map. So we can go to the messed up entry, fix the typo, and commit it back to the config map. So that worked. Scroll out. The next thing we need to do is tell Victoria Metrics to update the config. One thing you might be wanting to do is like just delete the pod, so it like reloads the config map or something. But if we go back to the auth can thing, we see that we don't have the required permission, right? So for pods, we can only get, watch, and list. Luckily for us, Victoria Metrics provides like an endpoint, which is called /reload. So you can basically use that to force the reload of the config. Right? So it might be necessary if you are not familiar with these tools, right, to be a bit creative, maybe search in their documentation to see how you can achieve various goals. Cool, and now we can see that the metrics endpoint is up and it got scraped. Yes, the scrapes count as 1. So now we go to the web UI and we can we can build our query, but I prepared it. We don't have to fiddle around with it, which is basically telling it, like, give me all the metrics from the backend instance. Execute. Thank you. And so if we go through the metrics, there we go. Then we can see the flag is showing up basically as a thing that got scraped from the instance. Right. Feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. Good stuff. All right, the last one is Victoria Logs, which we have not looked at so far. So then for the Victoria Logs namespace, we have very little permissions actually, right? We can only read namespaces, pods, and services. That's not a lot. Victoria Logs. Let's say get pod and services. It's the only stuff we have access to. So you can see there's a pod running, right? Gathers the logs of various things, and there's a service. So what can we do with this, right? We now have our nice admin access to Grafana, so maybe let's try to integrate these two things. So there's a Victoria Logs plugin in Grafana. And if we install it, and this is again about being creative, right? You have very little permission as an attacker, so you might try to like pivot to attack the Grafana and then try to use this Grafana access to get access to more information than you otherwise would have. So once the plugin is installed, we can add it as a data source, and we just build out the endpoint from the service name and so on, as you would in Kubernetes. So this brings us to this endpoint. And if we save and test, it should be green. Nice. And then we go to the Explore view. So we are now able to read the logs even though we don't have permissions in the namespace to do so. So if we put in a query, again, please give me all the logs from the backend namespace. And maybe we need to increase the time range. Then we can see that there's one log which produced a warning, and that log basically tried to access the orders endpoint in this backend service, and it says like flag is malformed. So interesting. So maybe behind this endpoint is the third flag hidden. Now we just need a way to somehow access this endpoint. And to make it a bit shorter, like you could play around and like use curl, and you will recognize that you don't have actually network access to the pod directly. So we again need to be a little bit creative. If you dig around a bit further in Grafana, there is something that is called the Infinity plugin. I'm not sure it should exist because it can do basically everything with it, right? You can do arbitrary requests to arbitrary endpoints, which is a bit weird from a security perspective, but great tool for us. So if you ever find your hands tied in your organization and you have access to Grafana, like now you have a powerful tool to implement whatever service in Grafana. Like, think about that. Cool. So there's this Infinity plugin. We can configure it. And as we noticed earlier, we came across these basic auth credentials, and they are very helpful now because they are for the backend, right, which we want to access, and is protected with basic auth. So if we snatch these and put it into front end and password, and then we also need to provide for which host these credentials are intended. And then we save and test. Cool. Now the plugin is pre-configured, and we can basically ask it to, guess I have to type that out. Then can please access the backend pod behind the backend service. And we want to have the orders endpoint. Okay. Let's see how that goes. Sweet. And there's our third flag. Right. So again, we had to be creative. There was no curl access to the pod, but we know that Grafana has this access to scrape metrics. So we can also abuse Grafana just to like do a GET request on the API that the service is providing. And yeah, there you have your third flag. Once you put all three in, you can basically go back to Slack and ask us for the next scenario. We have a easy, a medium, and a hard one. Yeah, and that will be the schedule for tomorrow. Any more questions? In the morning, I got the question, like, will there be stuff without Grafana? So yes, there will be stuff without Grafana. We try to put like varied scenarios out there, right? Some of them are like basic Kubernetes, just with the built-in resources. But we also like to look a bit further, like use one or two cloud native tools. We had scenarios with like Cert Manager or external secrets operator or whatever have you, right? Like the cloud native ecosystem is a bit bigger than just Kubernetes, so we try to accommodate that in the challenges.
Is the leaderboard overall or is it per scenario?
It's overall. Yes.
Are there like points based on how hard the particular questions are?
Yes, definitely. So this is the challenge for tomorrow. So there are 3 scenarios. Call me maybe is the easiest one, right? If you sum them up, you get like 80 points. Don't do math on stage. Live timing, and you can see landlord. All landlord only has 2 flags, but it provides like 100 points between them. Cool. You might have noticed that Wi-Fi is not the best in the room here. And in order to play, you have to connect via SSH to the server. We have already notified event staff, and they're trying to get this sorted until tomorrow. If it's not like if you have a hotspot, it's just SSH, right? It should not use more than like a gig of data throughout the day. There's like nothing fancy being transmitted. So if you can make that work and help yourself, that's another option. Cool. Yeah.
Do we have to come here to play? Can we just get the credentials and like play throughout the day?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, right. You get the credentials by reaching out on Slack, so you don't even have to come to this room. But I will be here tomorrow. John will be here tomorrow. Another guy from Control Plane. So if you have any questions, you can come to ask. You can ask us. One more thing. You can also request hints via the CTFD portal, but they will cost you some points. So you basically give up a portion of your final score for a hint. We will not give you the solutions, obviously, because like it's a competition. But we can help you with like, I don't know, basic stuff like maybe if you're good at social engineering, you'll get more out of us. But cool. Yeah, if anything else, like feel free to approach me now or tomorrow or whenever about the event, and I'll be excited to see you tomorrow. Right. Thanks.